Hello everybody, this is Dr. Novak again. In this video, I'm going to explain this little device right here. This is called a ORP meter, Oxidant Redox Potential Meter. And meters like this today you can buy for 30 bucks. And they're almost as cheap as TDS meters, but this one you can buy off of Amazon, $30. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you about an ORP meter and what our redox potential should be inside of a freshwater aquarium. That's coming up next. Okay, in this video, we're going to be talking about this meter here. Now, I went on the internet and I decided that I'm going to Google or find out from plant forums or forums for freshwater aquariums what the ORP is being suggested for our aquariums. Now, oxidant redox potential, what this reads basically is the oxidization of potential of your aquarium, meaning that in simple terms, how well is the aquarium oxidizing your waste? How well and is it oxidizing ammonia? How well is it oxidizing nitrites? How well is it oxidizing nitrates? How well is it oxidizing fish waste? How well is it oxidizing that piece of wood you just put in your aquarium that's starting to deteriorate very slowly? How well is the aquarium oxidizing? There are oxidizers out there, which we all know, like hydrogen peroxide, bleach is an oxidizer, hydrogen peroxide is an oxidizer. So in freshwater systems, it's between 300 to 400, and 350 is the norm, and 375 is about what our oceans are at as far as redox potential. How well is the system oxidizing the insalts that are coming into the aquarium? Something that it's not really told about in freshwater aquariums, which I really don't know why people aren't interested. Maybe people don't want to be told, but it's a very simple device, very easy to use, especially today when you can go buy devices like this that cost 30 bucks, and all you have to do is read your aquarium water. That's simple. And the best way to tell is, one thing is to get a standard. So if you put this underneath your tap water, like here in Florida, I put it underneath the tap water, test out the tap water, it's over 500 plus of a redox, meaning that it has a lot of oxidizing potential. 500 plus does, because it's been aerated heavily and it has chlorine or chloramine in it. That's an oxidizer. That's what purifies our water, keeps it so bacteria and germs don't infect our water and we wind up drinking it. The standard amount of redox for freshwater systems that you normally would get out of a tap or something like that is usually about 250 millivolt reading. That would be about what would be the standard. Some places it's going to be higher, other places it's going to be lower. Here in Florida, it's over 500. If you have a swimming pool, you would keep your redox at 700. 700 is awful high redox. In fact, if I remember my biology correctly, in saltwater systems, only the trinactal clam can take a redox of 700. Most saltwater inhabitants cannot take redox that high. And like I said, if the oceans are only about 375, that may explain why. So When we look at freshwater systems, and mostly out of the tap is 250. These devices here have become very inexpensive compared to 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And you can get them two ways. You can get them in a meter like this, or you can get them in a probe, like you can a pH probe. And it could be put in the back of a weir, or it could be put in a sump. And that will read your redox on a constant basis. Now, something like this comes in handy if you're like out in the field. For example, when I was in China, we were looking at a lake that was basically non-inhabitable. And we checked the redox of the lake at the very bottom of the lake, and the redox was negative 400, which means it was not oxidizing. Okay, it was in a reduction state, which was bad. We had to get the redox up of the lake, and all we did was add air pumps and air stones to take what's on the bottom and circulate the lake. It was a big lake. Well, within 6 months, the redox went up to 125 millivolts, which means the whole lake had turned around. So what was once considered to be a dead lake now became a thriving lake where animals can live in and plants can live in, only because of adding oxygen and keeping the lake stirred up. And therefore we got a positive reading of 125 millivolts. So when we look at our aquariums, and this costs no more than a test kit, a nitrate, phosphate test kit, no more than KH, GH, any test kit you're going to buy out there. These are like 30 bucks now. You can buy them a little bit expensiver. I don't think you can buy them cheaper, but you know, you can pay more if you want. Or you can get a whole setup where you have the probes, everything, and where it reads it constantly. A little bit over 100 bucks. You can buy one now without going into very expensive redox meters. So what this is going to tell us on an aquarium is it's going to tell you a lot of information. Like I said, I went on the internet and I was trying to find what is recommended for freshwater aquariums. It's a simple question. What is the redox recommended for freshwater? Well, you find all kinds of information for redox for saltwater, but you can't really find much information for redox with freshwater. The answers that I saw from people who asked such questions were basically like a politician answers a question. You never got an answer. There was no direct answer. They answered it like a politician because nobody knows. I know, but what I'm saying is the hobbyist doesn't know. A lot of hobbyists will say, well, you don't need to know your redox. Why? Redox tells you your oxidation potential of your aquarium, how well it's able to oxidize insalts. Now, we know for a fact that when you get aquariums and you make a deep substrate, as you go deeper in the substrate, your oxidizing potential decreases. Okay. Now you still want to have a redox, meaning you still want oxidizers as you go deeper and deeper in your substrate. The trouble is, when you have no oxygen in your substrate, like people who put the substrate at the bottom of their aquariums, you cannot have a positive redox potential. You will go into negative digits, as I explained to you about the lake in China. You will start going into negative numbers, meaning that you do not have any oxidizers, you have reducers. Not oxidizers. Oxidizers now have stopped. You cannot have a positive redox potential in a substrate that has no oxygen. Okay, I can't make that any clearer. That means as you go deeper in the substrate and oxygen levels go lower and lower and lower till they don't exist, you no longer have oxidizers. in that substrate. I am going to give you some excerpts from a book written by Mo, which is a ichthyologist and a microbiologist with saltwater systems, something that he wrote over 31 years ago. And it will explain to you just exactly what I have explained to you about Redox. And I will get into that and show you pictures of readings that I took on this aquarium. That means the people who advocate your substrate being 4 or 5 inches deep, and they put it directly on the bottom of the aquarium, and that has 0 oxygen. That's why it turns black, because the roots of the plant or the mud system that they're using turns anaerobic. You have 0 oxidation potential with aquariums like that, meaning it's not oxidizing any of the insalts that are coming into the aquarium. Understand that. When you stop oxidizing insalts, you come up with problems. These meters, which everybody's, oh, you don't need one. These meters can explain to you exactly what's going on in your aquarium. Why do you have algae? When you do a water change, what is the redox potential? What is it after a week that you've done the water changes? How well is your aquarium running? Why are you getting algae? Why are you not getting algae? And what is the potential of your oxidizers in your aquarium? You know, this is fish poop and everything else that's being oxidized. The higher the redox, the more oxidizers you have in your aquarium to take care of these insalts. If you've been watching my videos, that is the reason we make a plenum. Because in a plenum, you still have redox. Okay, meaning that inside that plenum, you have high enough redox to still have oxidizers to take care of biological and chemical insalts in a plenum. And as you know, when I set up the aquarium, and I showed you other people where they have put a substrate underneath your aquarium, I'll show you a few pictures of different substrates you can put underneath your plenum. And of course, you don't fill up the plenum, you just put a little bit down there. These little spheres or balls or whatever you're using that you do put down there, they're going to act still as oxidizers or spaces for bacteria to grow to oxidize the insalts. You cannot have oxidizers when you don't have any oxygen. Okay, you start going into negative numbers. So what we try to do in our aquarium is create an environment that has a lot of these oxidizers, because in my aquarium I have a lot of driftwood. It is decaying. All wood that you put into your aquarium is decaying slowly. So you need an oxidizer to take care of that organic material. Otherwise, you'll pollute your tank. And you'll have no clue why you're polluting, your tank is being polluted. You need, like in my aquarium, for example, for example, I'll reach over here. Here's a dead leaf. A leaf. And it's all deteriorating. I don't worry too much about stuff like that in my aquarium, because I have enough oxidizers to break that leaf down and to oxidize it, so I don't have a pH swing, an ammonia swing, a nitrite swing, a nitrate swing, or phosphate, because I have enough oxidizers in this aquarium. That little meter or a probe if you want to set one up so you can constantly keep track. This will tell you how well your oxidizers are working inside an aquarium. I will give you excerpts from what Mo writes about it. But for right now, I will show you oxidization of your aquarium changes throughout the day. It's supposed to change. It doesn't stay stable. In marine systems, you want to keep it pretty well stable because in marine systems are different than freshwater systems because of the fact that in marine systems is very stable. And it's the most stable environment on the planet Earth, the ocean. But in freshwater systems, they're not as stable, and they don't have to be quite as stable as marine systems do. It's more flexible. But we know that if we have a constant, which is about 250 millivolts for freshwater, we know that for a fact that there's kind of like a constant. But what should our aquariums be reading? This is the answer you can't seem to get on forums or anything. A normal aquarium, if it has enough oxidizers in it, should be reading at least 125 millivolts to 200 millivolts. That would be an ideal range for an aquarium, between 125 and 200. In a plenum, because it still has oxygen at low levels, which we all know now is called anoxic conditions, you will still have a oxidizers there of still reading at least maybe 50, 40, 50, 60 millivolts. Very low in millivolt reading. But you still have oxidizers. As I explained to you in the lake in China, it was minus 400. We finally in 6 months got up to 125 millivolt reading, which means the oxidizers were working. It straightened up the whole lake. Algae went away. This is what happens. And not that every algae is going to go away on the planet or in your aquarium either if you have high oxidized. Let's say you had an aquarium that was 300, 350 millivolts, just like a saltwater aquarium. It doesn't guarantee you're going to get rid of algae because there are algae that can live in such high oxidation environments. But there are other algae that cannot live in high oxidation environments. And that's what we're trying to find out with this meter, is how dirty is your aquarium? Now, let's take a look at this aquarium here. This aquarium is 6 months old now. You saw me set it up and everything. Now, I do a water change. Okay, once a week, just like we all do. I do a water change because I have a lot of snails. I have shrimp constantly molting. I have snails. I had a lot of baby snails from my mystery snails. So now they're growing. They're over maybe 5/16 in diameter already. So they are requiring calcium. There are pond snails in here, which came in with the plants. They require, so you have to keep putting back calcium and things like that. And since we have very hard water here in Florida, the same as we did in Illinois, you will see the dots of water that dry up and you will see the calcium that's left over, which is good. So I take out at least 10 gallons of water, 50 gallons. It doesn't take much to do that, and put fresh water in. A lot of people ask, though, how do I clean my substrate? I haven't. And I really don't worry about dead leaves. If I can't reach them, that's good enough. And here's another thing with oxidizers. What if you have a fish that goes in the back of your aquarium? It dies. You can't get to it to save your life. You're going to have to tear the whole tank apart. If you have enough oxidizers, redox, if your redox is high enough, it will take care of that dead animal and decompose it and everything else. This is what redox tells you. The ability of oxidizers in your aquarium to take care of the biological and chemical insults. Okay? So a lot of people don't know that. One, when you put substrate at the bottom of your aquarium and you have zero oxygen, you have no oxidizers. Therefore, at the bottom of your aquarium, it does not have the ability to oxidize anything because you have zero in there. And you don't have oxidizers to take care of any insults that are happening. Any dirt, any fish poop, anything that migrates down in there can't get oxidized. It can't turn into what we call mum. And mum is the inert leftovers of after everything's been broken down into its simplest form. That's what mum is. It's inert. It's no different than if you put gravel in your aquarium. It's inert. It won't do anything. It won't hurt anything. It's been broken down into its most simplest form. Oxidizers do that. So things migrate down. You can't help that. Whether it's fish waste, food, whatever it is. Hopefully that some people say, well, they'll put in some Malaysian Liberian snails into your gravel and they'll pick up your food. But what about the waste that they create inside the substrate? And that gets migrated down and you have no oxidizers to take care of it. You have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. And that's exactly what happens. So when aquariums start going south on people, one question I would always ask is, what is your redox? Do you know what your redox is when the aquarium was doing great? Do you know what your redox? No, they have no clue. Well, you can buy a meter like this for $30, the same as an API test kit or any other test kit. It's not that expensive. So there's ways that you could do it. You could either, first thing you want to do is you want to take your probe, you want to clean it, and then you want to put it in your tank. Now I have the lights on because I'm doing the video. Normally the lights are not on. And I'll give you a video. I'll go to the computer and I'm going to show you throughout the day the redox readings of this particular tank. It may be higher in the morning and lower at night, only because you're producing more oxidizers during the day when the lights are on because the fish are active, they're pooing more, they're eating, you're feeding. That causes problems. All these things cause problems. And this is the reason why some people say, oh, I have hair algae or I got some beard algae and I don't know, I didn't have it. What's your redox? Did your redox go down? Was it stable? Did something was affected? Why you start getting that beard algae? Well, I have no clue. So for the expense of a cheap meter, you can find out. You can say, hey, I got a problem here. I'm looking at a problem. I can see, I could read my meter. I could see that, holy cow, that the set points is between 125 and 200, and I'm only dealing with now 110 or 100. I got a problem. My redox potential was too low. What am I doing wrong? Am I feeding too much? Am I adding too many chemicals in there? Is there not enough oxygen in the aquarium? Are things dirty? Is my canister filthy dirty? See, this could tell you what's going on. You may be cleaning your canister when you don't have to. Your redox could be good enough. So instead of buying all kinds of chemicals and everything, that we know there are certain chemicals that will raise redox because they are oxidizers. Like I said, hydrogen peroxide is used a lot in the aquarium trade where people will spray hydrogen peroxide on algae. That will raise your redox. But your redox will only raise for a short time until those oxidizers dissipate, and then the redox will drop back down again to what your stability of your aquarium is. Now, like I said, you can see there are leaves that are rotting away. A lot of hobbyists would say, well, I cut those leaves out because all they are is adding pollution. I don't. Okay, I don't. I know the system. I invented the system. I designed the system. I know how it works. I don't have to worry about it. The decaying leaves, the snails like to eat, especially some of the shrimp. Snails will eat it. Some of the bigger snails may wind up eating it. You will see that some of the decaying leaves, the pond snails will jump on them because now they're becoming softer and more palatable, and they start eating away the leaf. So it becomes a food source for the snails. So that's why I like snails, along with shrimp, to keep the tank. And the tank's not all full of algae and stuff like that. The reason this tank is all stabilized like it is without algae, because I have a high redox. If I had a low redox, it wouldn't look like this. But I have a high redox. And don't forget, I'm using a canister filter, not a sump that would have all kinds of stuff in it. I just have a canister filter with the BCB basket. I have a weir, which allows water to cascade in and take film off the top. And it replenishes by the canister filter, then filling back up again, bringing it up, and just recycling everything. Along with a plenum of the right size, of the right height, of the right depth, with the right size of aquarium substrate. With iron. I'm going to read you right from Mo about iron. What he says. And remember, that what I will read to you was written over 31 years ago. So there's nothing new to really what I'm telling you, because all this was done, like me with the plenum, with the anoxic filtration system. This was done way over 30 years ago. This isn't new technology, but everyone thinks it is. So let's turn around and just take this probe. The first thing I want to do is clean it. I'll be back, and we can just take a quick dip and see what the redox of the tank. The light's been on now, I'm going to say, I turned it on early. It's been on for at least almost 2 hours. Normally, the lights do not come on this early. They don't come on till 4 and turn off at 10. Only 6 hours to get all this, because that's all that's needed. That's the minimum light needed for plants. 6 hours is good enough. So let me clean this, and I'll be right back, and we'll see what the redox of it is right now. And then I'll take you over to the computer, and I'll show you some of the results I got from this aquarium. Remember, I have stuff in the back of dead leaves. I do have leaves decaying here. I got leaves decaying over here. They're older leaves. That's what happens. I don't snip them out. I've admitted that to people. A little lazy with that, but I depend on my bacteria in my aquarium to take care of that. Only some bigger, older leaves, if I can get them, and I see it's easy to get, will I take those out and cut them down. Otherwise, maintenance is really, really low, almost next to nothing. Not like a lot of planted aquarium people who are, almost a slave to the aquarium. I don't want to be a slave. I got too much to do. So let me clean this off. I'll be right back, and I'll do a quick check, and then we're going to go over to the computer so I can show you and give you some excerpts from Mo. Right back. Okay, so now I cleaned the probe off. It was over 500, and you can do it with distilled water. And now I'm going to put the probe in the aquarium. Normally what you do, and I'll show you pictures, you can use a a glass, fill it with about 1 inch of water, put the probe in and let it sit in there for a few minutes, like 3 minutes, 5 minutes. So the test takes at least 3 to 5 minutes to get a true test of what your water is. So I cleaned the probe off, and we're going to see what the redox is of this aquarium that gets 1 water change a week. I do not siphon any of the substrate. It's using a plenum, it's using a BCB basket, and it's using the 88 canister filter, the big one. And of course it has a refill on it. So as the water evaporates from the wear, and just because it's an open top aquarium, when water evaporates, it automatically fills it, an automatic fill. So that's what we're looking at. And right now, as I'm waiting for this to stabilize, it's dropping, which it should be dropping, okay? Because when I checked out tap water, it's over 500. Okay, that's because, like I said, chloramine, the chlorine that's in there, the chloramine that's in there, which is the added molecule of ammonia. But let's find out what this is after the lights have been on for a couple hours. I have a clamp that I'm holding the meter into the tank, so the bottom of the meter is into the aquarium. And we should see a drop in ORP within 5 minutes. So that's the time you should wait. This morning I checked out the ORP of the water. Before lights came on, it was 296. And of course, at the end of the evening last night, I checked the ORP of the aquarium, and it was 210. So you see how it drops as the day goes on, and then overnight the ORP recovers. So what I wanted to do is pretty much read to you from Martin Moe Jr. And Martin Moe Jr., he wrote this over 31 years ago, and he holds a master's degree on fish biology, marine biology, ichthyology, and commercial marine fish cultural for almost 30, as culturist for almost 30 years. He writes books, and he has researches, but what I'm going to actually read you excerpts from is a book that's over 31 years old. And this may make some sense to you, or bring some light to you, and so you understand. And I'm reading right from the book. I'm quoting you right from his book. So there is no question that this is exactly the way it is. It reads as this: a negative redox potential only occurs in the absence of free oxygen. So in order to get a negative redox potential, you can't have any oxygen, as I explained to you with the lake in China. So those people who put dirt or sand or whatever on the bottom of their aquariums, and at the very bottom there is no oxygen because it's turning black, that means you have no potential, or you'll get a negative reading instead of a positive reading, meaning you have no oxidizers anymore because there's no oxygen to create the oxidizers. However, the accumulation of reduced molecules, the result of the addition of organic matter, will diminish the redox potential even if oxygen is at saturation levels, okay? And that means if there is too much organics, too many insalts to the aquarium, even with all the oxygen, you may read low oxygen or low redox potential. So it relates to both. And of course, there are oxidizing agents, as we all know. Hydrogen peroxide, potassium permanganate will oxidize more of these reduced molecules and increase the redox potential of the solution. The higher the redox potential, the more pure the solution. Thus, knowing the redox potential of the water in a marine aquarium, this also pertains to freshwater aquariums, systems at a specific pH can provide a relatively precise measure of the system's capability to support organisms that require pure water. Right from his book. So the higher your redox potential, the purer your water is it's to hold and keep away algae and support the life that is in it, with causing you less problems. This is just chemistry, and we're just carrying the chemistry on over to biology of aquariums. Okay. He also writes in his book, now remember, this was written over 31 years ago, denitrification. Denitrification, biological denitrification, is a relatively new method of controlling nitrate accumulation in hobbyist marine systems. Also, denitrification, when he wrote this book, denitrification is relatively new in freshwater, but in freshwater, nothing was known for denitrification. Okay, it was only starting to be used in marine systems. Denitrifying bacteria are found in all waters all over the world, and most can function in the presence or absence of oxygen. Facultative bacteria, people, they live in the presence of oxygen because they are facultative, meaning they have the facility to live in oxygen-free zones as well as zones that have oxygen at low levels. That is what he is exactly talking about here. He's talking about facultative, heterotrophic, anaerobic bacteria. Dependent on the species or mix of species, they have the ability to feed on organic compounds, mostly carbonates, and respire anaerobically in the absence of oxygen through the mechanism of reducing nitrates to a variety of other compounds, including nitrite, ammonia, nitrous oxide, and molecular nitrogen. These bacteria that are here, like Bacilla, for example, Pseudomonas bacteria, just to give you an example of a couple of them, okay? And numerous others are found in small populations in all marine systems. They are also found in small population in all freshwater systems. The genus Thiobacillus, which there are 8 species of Thiobacillus, utilize reduced sulfur compounds such as sulfite, thiosulfate, and bisulfite as food, and under anaerobic conditions respire by reducing nitrate and liberating nitrogen from the nitrate as nitrogen gas. These bacteria can be used to remove nitrate from marine system, also freshwater systems, when the proper food in the proper amount is provided under anaerobic conditions. It is the kind of food that is offered that determines the type of bacteria that colonize the filter medium. Denitrification can also occur in the oxygenated environments of the system, which is the facultative bacteria. But this natural process can seldom cope with the normal accumulations of nitrate unless an anaerobic site is provided. So what he's trying to explain there is that there was, back in its days, denitrification processes, and you had to have a glucose formula to feed it in order for it to denitrify. It gets a little more complicated, but that's something that they use in marine systems, not something that we used in freshwater systems. I thought that would be very interesting because as you listen to what he is talking about, this explains that if you want to create an environment that will literally take nitrates and break them down into N2, you need to have a special environment that's anaerobic, but feeding the bacteria a glucose formula. Now, when we use a plenum, on the other hand, okay, you do not have to worry about using a glucose to break down the nitrogen, or when you use a BCB basket, because you are creating the correct conditions, which is oxygenated, but at such low oxygen levels that the bacteria that we depend on in our aquariums so substantially that these bacteria can't live in those environments. And Nitrosomatis europaea and Nitrobacter winogradskii is the name of those exact bacteria. Nobody talks about that. No one explains to you what their real names are. But those are the names of the bacteria that live in oxygenated environments. These bacteria then cannot live in the low environment, and therefore you need a different kind of bacteria than those two, okay, called facultative anaerobic heterotrophic bacteria. And they live in that oxygen zone from 2 parts per million down to 5 parts per million. Okay, they then can utilize oxygen if need be, or the nitrogen, and turn it into a nitrogen gas, N2, and use the oxygen if need be as a food source from phosphates. That's why you keep your nitrogen levels low and your phosphate levels low. Anyhow, as you can see, I wanted to read you that. This was written 31 years ago. This is the way they used to do it. They would actually have to have an anaerobic conditions, but feeding the bacteria a glucose formula. Okay, a lot of people, I think if I remember correctly, they would use something like apple cider or something like that. It had to be a natural glucose syrup that they used. That was one of them. One of them was, I think, an alcohol base. But if you're going to think, on the other hand, that you are going to have anaerobic conditions at the bottom of your aquarium because you are using a deep sand bed or you're using a mud system, think again. Right there from Mo's book, you are going to go into negative redox readings, and you're not going to have any oxidizers to take care of anything. And these bacteria that live in anaerobic conditions can only take a nitrate and break it back down into ammonia, which is more deadlier than the nitrate. This has to be understood of what is happening when you have a substrate that doesn't remain full of oxygen. Now, that's why you use a plenum, because the whole entire substrate now is guaranteed to be oxygenated at low levels, and inside the plenum itself, you're still guaranteed to have redox potential, and it can even go down to 20, it could be 30, it could be 40, 50, somewhere in there, but you still have the oxidation potential there. So if you add, like I said before, any of the box of substrates, if you want, that's an option, and you added them down there, those still then can act as a denitrification substrate. Because now, because the water's moving so slow, you don't have to worry about, remember, polymeric adhesive and the substrates I was talking about in earlier videos. If you haven't seen them, you should go watch earlier videos to get up to speed on what I'm talking about. They can adhere to those substrates because they have a rough a rough texture, and they have crevices in them and everything that can really help so bacteria can live in there without creating the polymeric adhesive, and they can utilize also nitrates and phosphates and looking for their oxygen mean. As long as you have extremely low oxygen, and believe me, the oxygen level is going to be extremely low, 0.5 parts per million, but you're still going to be oxidizing anything that comes in to the plenum all the way through the plenum. Unlike others that are depending on plants to try to bring oxygen all the way down into the complete substrate. So the question, I guess, then, as a hobbyist should be asking some of these other people who advocate their systems, what is the redox? What is the redox of your substrate? What is the redox at the bottom of your aquarium where the substrate meets the intersection of topography of your glass? What is it? What is your redox? Because that is going to tell you if that is able to oxidize any of the insalts that are coming into that system. Okay, so I've given you this whole redox thing pretty simple and plain, okay, and you can get more complicated explanations of redox, but make sure your redox potential stays at least, if you check your aquarium, at least 125 to 200. It can go above that. That's good. And just keep an eye on your redox. That will let you know if your aquarium is doing good, if it's doing bad, if it's not. And if you want to read redox at the very bottom of your aquarium, then you would have to siphon water out from the extreme bottom, like inside your plenum itself. You would have to siphon water out of the plenum and test that water to find out what your redox is. It's very simple. But see, none of these other people talk about anything about, well, does it have the oxidizing potential? You know, these people that advocate stuff like that need to be asked the hardball questions. They can't be given these softball questions constantly. Does your system still oxidize the insalts that are coming into it? And what is your redox potential? And show us. Prove it to us. Put them on the line. Say, prove it to us. What is it? How do we know it's still oxidized? How do we know it's not causing problems? This would explain why aquariums that use these systems, and even I admit it, and Capec has admitted it, that these systems like this, when I put substrate at the bottom of the aquarium like that, it's a crapshoot whether or not I'm going to be successful. In fact, one out of 4 aquariums I set up that way will be successful. The other 3 will not. Within a year, they will collapse. and I'll start getting algae problems, I'll start getting hair algae problems, and things just won't be going right because they will collapse. This explains to you why they collapse. You now don't have oxidizers that were once there, are gone, and now you can't take care of any of the insults that are coming into the aquarium, and now other things start happening and the system collapses. Okay, so that's enough of this video for now. I hope you understood a little bit about redox and redox potential, and maybe you'll buy that cheap $30 meter. Like I said, you can put it in your aquarium. I clamp mine with a cheap light clamp, let it sit there for about 5 minutes to adjust, clean it, and put it in your aquarium and see what your redox is. And if you test it all during the day like I did, I found out that in the morning it was 296, and by evening, after 6 hours of the lights being on, it dropped all the way down to 210. So it does go up and it goes down. This is how redox goes. It will go up, it will go down. That's what you want to see. You don't want to see crashes, though. You don't want to see where in the morning it's, I'm just giving it as an example. Let's say it's your redox is only 200, or let's say it's only 150, and you don't want to see in the evening it's all the way down to 85. You don't want to see a crash, and then it's going to say, wow, what's going on? Why is it crashing? Because about 125 is about as low as you want to go in a freshwater system with your redox. You don't want to go any lower than that, really, in your aquarium. Your substrate will vary as oxygen levels change, but you still have to maintain some sort of redox. Okay, you still have to maintain that, because once it hits zero, no oxygen, then you start going into negative redox readings. And then everything gets wrecked. Everything gets destroyed. That's why I explained to you the lake out in China. It had a minus 400 redox reading, and it couldn't sustain any life at all. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned a little something about it and have a little fun. Meters only cost about 30 bucks. You can buy more advanced meters for a little over 100. I found out they will read your redox and your pH for you, and you can put them in your wear, or if you have a sump, you can put them in your sump, or you can put them in your aquarium and hide them. It's best to hide them so they don't get any light, so you don't want algae to grow on them or anything like that. And they are very easy to clean and put back into your aquarium. So until next time, this is Dr. Novak. Happy fish keeping, and thank you for watching.